Hey everybody, how's everyone doing? Hope everyone's having a fantastic day one of NFT.NYC. We're gonna try to keep our intros super quick because we wanna get to the meat of our discussion. So today we're gonna be talking about the NFT landscape in Japan. A couple of very quick introductions because unfortunately our slides didn't make it today. So to my immediate left, we have Mike. He's a contemporary Japanese culture specialist, creative director of Push, currently based in Japan, with a focus on contemporary culture-oriented brands. Then, to the left of Mike, we have Kosuke. He's a journalist and arts professional based in New York. He writes for various publications. He's definitely been around the block, a true expert. And then further to Kosuke's left is Taihei. Taihei is the founder of Startbahn, STARTBAHN, and a contemporary artist that has used the internet as a medium. As your facilitator, my name is Yayoi. I have about 2 decades worth of experience in the traditional art world, so not the digital art world, both in US and in Japan, and a self-declared noob in the NFT space. Some of the things that bring us together: we have a deep knowledge of and love for Japanese contemporary culture and Japanese contemporary art. We also have subject matter expertise on how the digital and physical and phygital fit into all of this. So let's dive right in. Taihei, welcome to New York. For someone who doesn't know, how do you describe what Startbahn is?
Thanks, Yayoi. I came from Tokyo, way from Japan. It was a 14 hours flight. Thank you very much for inviting us to such a great event. As an artist, I started my Startbahn project since 2006. Back then, I was curious of the internet age, how the internet service or the internet infrastructure changed the art industry in terms of distribution and valuing. And currently, we provide infrastructure for art, for authenticating and make the artwork, creative industry reliable. And thank you. That's what we do in Startbahn.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. And for those of you who are interested in checking it out, please do check it out. Again, STARTBAHN. And of course, the general public and the media have really started showing interest, right, in blockchain technology and NFTs, particularly since last year. So, Taihei, how do you think the general public's understanding of blockchain and NFTs has changed, and how do you think that's changed the way Startbahn is being perceived?
Yeah, it has changed dramatically. Back then, in the art village generally, they were kind of skeptical for the fact that blockchain will authenticate art. But now they are skeptical in the bubble of our market. So the art village, they are always skeptical in blockchain technology. But even back in 2016, which we started this research of blockchain, there were people understanding blockchain are very useful to authenticate art. But theoretically, not like programmatically. But now, after the bubble of NFT, people are realizing that the impact of NFT. So they are now focusing. They are confronting this tool as more realistic and practical tool, I guess. And the biggest difference back then, blockchain technology, it was very hard to tell what blockchain is. But now people are willing to make business out of NFTs. So as I mentioned, we started the research from 2016, and we released the blockchain infrastructure in the testnet in 2017. But it was only for the physical art gallery, or it was only to support the auction houses to ensure the reliability of physical art. But after the NFT culture arousing, the bubble, people are willing to make their own NFT marketplace or NFT service. So we kind of tweaked our infrastructure so that we can support digital art, not only art, but manga or like anime or trading card. To support those kind of industry. And we also made an API, an SDK, to let the enterprise users to utilize NFT to make NFT services. Actually, we started a collaboration with Shueisha. This is a world #1 publishing company of manga. They do Dragon Ball and Naruto. I think everyone knows them. We were lucky that we launched this service 2021 February. That was before Christie's People Christie's. But after so we were kind of fast in getting into this industry. That was we provided a blockchain certificate to ensure the physical issuance. But after this, in this 1 year, a lot of IP content holders, game providers, and all sorts of industry are willing to make NFT services.
That's great. Thanks so much for that. And then because we want to make sure that we hear from everybody else on the panel too, let's maybe move a little bit to Kosuke. Kosuke, you've been in the traditional art world for decades now, looking and writing about contemporary art, including from Japan. You wanted to introduce a couple of Japanese art projects for us today. Unfortunately, we don't have the imagery from the slide, so we're going to try to explain them a bit to you. But let's start with the Nishikoi Project. What is that about?
Yeah, hi, this is Kosuke. I'm based in New York, and I'm Japanese, so I'm always sort of trying to follow what's going on in Japan. And well, 2.5 years during the pandemic, I was going to Japan quite often, but because of the COVID, I couldn't go. And then that's when those NFT really took off. And interesting thing is, I was still kind of following what's going on in Japan with the news as well as social network. And then, it might be a little limited because I wasn't there, but I was sort of doing the research, what's interesting, at least from the point of view that I live in Japan, I live in New York, and comparing like what's going on in the United States and see Japan, and then I sort of doing research for this panel, and I picked 3 projects, and yes, as we wanted to show all those nice pictures of those projects and this technical issue, and it's really difficult to verbally explain those things, but let me try. And so I wanted to introduce 3 things. One is called Nishikoi NFT. This is like a sort of, Nishikoi is a Japanese oriental carp, and it's the motif of the NFT, but this is actually to revitalize a dying small village within the mountain in Japan. So this village is called Yamakoshi Village, and going back like 2006, I'm sorry, it was also supposed to be in the slide, but then there was an earthquake hit that little village, and so that was 2,200 people live there, and it's like everyone is getting old and it's in the middle of mountain. It's really difficult to get to. And obviously with the earthquake, everyone had to sort of evacuate. But after earthquake, 800 people came back. So, but still, like 800 people is a really, really small amount. And they thought, they needed to do something to revitalize this little village. And one of the people thought, let's use NFT for somehow. And then they sort of started working with people who are familiar with NFT. And those people liked the idea, like, oh, this is not only to sell artwork, but also it has sort of a side, it's the purpose is to somehow re-energize this little village. And they sort of they commissioned 2 generative artists who are kind of known in that field. So those artists liked the idea. They made a beautiful image, generative work with the cup that's really the one of the industry in that little village. And so the thing is, 800 people live there, and they started minting those NFT, and they use this NFT as like e-residency. So it's not really, really official, but official sort of city hall recognize it, and then they try to utilize that as an e-residency. And now there's 800 holders of this NFT, so it's almost same amount of people as the villagers. And they obviously with the sales, they made some money, and that money is kept, and then they're gonna use this budget to do some real activity in the village. So a lot of NFT holders propose something, and if you own the NFT, you can vote in the Discord. And so that's all, it's like almost working as a governance token.
Yeah, and thanks so much for that, because, right, this is such an interesting concept where at the end of the day, we're using digital technology for a remote area where people are really trying to be engaged in a new way, even though we're supporting sort of a remote area. We're sort of getting low on time, so I want to drop a little bit to another example. Shinsei Galverse, because I know that both Kosuke and Mike wanted to talk about this project. So Shinsei Galverse, what is it, and how is this different from other PFP projects? Maybe Mike, because we haven't heard your voice yet.
Yeah, thank you. So I think just to zoom out and talk about the context a little bit, we've seen tons of NFT, especially PFP projects, come through the space with a big Japan influence, right? So Azuki, Oniforce, obviously, CloneX, which was initially sort of titled, I think, the Akira project. But we've seen very few authentic Japanese projects. And what really sort of caught my attention, being based in Tokyo, kind of looking through the sort of Japanese cultural lens, about Shinsei Galverse was just that it was this really sort of fresh, authentic, really legitimately cool project. And for those of you that don't know, it's kind of anime inspired. It draws on like 90s Sailor Moon aesthetics, but it speaks to sort of Akira Ghost in the Shell kind of Neo-Tokyo worldview. And the lead illustrator, Ayaka, she comes from like a hip-hop background. She's done a lot of music videos for rappers, but she's also an anime illustrator. So just a very sort of legitimately cool project. And I think that's something that we're hopefully going to see a lot more of coming out of Japan.
Yeah, and thanks so much for that, right? We're talking about legitimately cool, authentic engagement coming out of Japan, this sort of Japanese cultural dissemination that seems to be particularly working well in the NFT space. Kosuke, what about you? What interests you about Shinsei Galverse?
Yeah, so the Galverse, I don't know if you know well about those collections from Japan. There are many collections from Japan, but it's always, everybody in Japan often has this difficulty of language, barrier, and everything. So it's big in Japan, but not as much in other countries. And Galverse actually did really well in this sort of leap the language barrier. I mean, the thing is, the content is really Japan. However, the communication, when they minted everything, the communication was only in English. They have, intentionally including people, they're working with the people, non-Japanese together to sort of make the global community. So that was something really, really make me interested. And another thing is they have a clear roadmap. So, like it's not only the PFP, but also their goal, and they raised the fund by selling this 8,888 NFTs, and they got money, and then they like right now making animation out of it. So that's like a really interesting, clear roadmap, and they're going to have some other things in between. So it's really cool.
If I can, just another quick point. I think it's fascinating that although there's huge interest in Japan, Japanese projects in general, Japanese media doesn't necessarily travel that well. So, if you think about, the likes of Azuki Clonex, when a Western team does the sort of Japan style with, the sort of hybrid aesthetics and so on, it seems to perform pretty well. But historically, anything too Japanese doesn't necessarily travel as well as you might expect. And the interesting thing about Shinsei Galverse is, to me, there's an academic called Iwabuchi, something or the other, from, I think, the early 2000s, who spoke about how Pokemon and some of the most successful Japanese IP franchises are actually culturally odorless. So although it's distinctive, it's foreign, it's somewhat alien, it's actually not super Japanese. It's sort of ambiguous, and it can be left to the users or the viewers' interpretation. And I think that's something that the likes of Shinsei Galverse do well. And I think part of it is through the logistics and the process. It's because they have a hybrid team. It's because they hire and they work with partners all around the world. And part of it is also growing up in a globalized sort of mediascape. And having influences beyond Japan, like global rap and hip hop and streetwear, and how that all disseminates into this sort of, I guess like myriad sort of aesthetic space. So I think projects like that travel well, and again, that's something that I think we might see more of going forward.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. You just talked a little bit about culturally odorless things potentially translating well into the digital space. I do want to posit, though, that Japanese contemporary culture more generally, and this is going to be opened up to everybody, is considered pretty content-rich on the global scale, right? Everything from manga, anime, contemporary art, pret-a-porter fashion, street culture. There's a lot that is considered, quote, pretty cool about Japan. But a question to each of you, what makes, do you think, the NFT format a new or potential successful avenue for the dissemination of these modalities?
Okay. I just mentioned that we collaborate with Shueisha, the world #1 manga publisher. The collaboration was actually their first international selling e-commerce project. So they were kind of skeptical. They were kind of worried about like copyright violation for like international sales. But blockchain certificate kind of supported them to go global. And speaking of art, like general art, I was from the oil painting department, and I'm from the physical art industry. But speaking of emerging artists, if you want to go global, you have to actually go to New York or London to make show your artwork to the gallerists and the collectors. But NFT, you don't have to actually see you can see the actual work through the internet, and you don't have to pay shipping fee or like the travel fee. So there's a lot of potential for Japanese artists in this area, I guess.
Kosuke, what about you?
Well, maybe, I don't know if it's Japanese specific or not, but then I think this, and obviously NFT is utilized, well, to make us feel that you own something in digital. And then a friend of mine who published a book in Japanese, and it's a hardcover book, and then he made it in NFT. So the book is, the text itself, you can read it sort of online, it's available. But then he wanted to make this NFT borrowable. So it's like an interesting sort of twist. You can borrow, people can, if you pay just gas fee, for this NFT to move, you can borrow this book and you can download the text itself. So for him, so as a text was his main content, but he can willing to give it away. But then still there is this NFT stands for this sort of feeling of ownership. And it's like, in art, you see the art in museum and you can see it. And owning is another thing. Anyone can see it, but then you own. So the book, it's a little more difficult because people think, why do you give out your book? You should sell this book. But then, for him, it's like, the content can go away, can distribute it, but at the same time, there are like people who want to own it for the bookshelf. Like, the NFT sort of makes it sort of happen in the digital space, and that's kind of interesting sort of twist to me. And it's not really Japanese only, but.
Thanks for that. Mike, what about you?
Yeah, so we've spoken a lot about creator culture and talking about Japanese creators, but when I think of Japan and the landscape of NFTs in Japan, one of the most, I guess, intriguing aspects to me is the consumer culture. And historically, if you think about anime, if you think about manga, if you think about otaku culture, a key part of that is how the fans and how the consumers interact with IP and remix it. So there's fan art, there's all sorts of ways that fan communities can extend and, I guess, in many ways, sort of elevate IP. And that's something that has been going on in Japan for decades in ways that we don't see in the West. So for me, if you're launching an NFT project, the Japanese audience, the consumer base, is of huge value and huge potential in terms of being able to tap into that latent creativity and the ability to remix IP and elevate it in ways that you probably won't see from audiences in other markets. And I think that's something that Artifact have really acknowledged with CloneX. They're really sort of taking a big interest in their Japanese owners. And yeah, I think I'll be very interested to see that sort of intersection between, I guess, global or Western projects and what happens when it filters through to a Japanese consumer base.
Yeah, thanks so much. And again, we don't have that much more time left. I think we just started to dip our feet a little bit into the intersection of Japanese culture, Japanese art, digital technology, and NFTs. I think the final question, very, very rapid fire for each of you, in each of your own opinions, what should Japanese content creators be doing to further their involvement with NFTs or the crypto world? And the answer that I would give is building an audience outside of Japan. What about you, Mike?
I see a lot of Japanese projects coming up recently that, and I don't like to use this phrase, but it almost feels like almost self-orientalizing. They're really playing into the sort of traditional Japanese aesthetics, the kind of the American or Western gaze in ways that they don't necessarily need to. Whereas I think if you look at Murakami Takashi or people like him, they don't really care and they just put out what they're doing and what they've been doing for their entire career. So I think just be true to yourself, be authentic, and there'll be an audience that respects that.
And I think as Mike mentioned, like this sort of image, the sort of taste of the visual image is really common, as Japanese or non-Japanese in NFT. So the stage is ready, and I think that the biggest concern is the communication. And the Gyarwas, Kusano-san told me that, if you know other NFT project people in other country, and you can start talking, and then maybe English isn't that easy, but then there's a common sort of thing to talk about, and then they understand your thing, you understand their thing, then you can start sort of building community together. So I think you can work with other artists in other country that would help bring your Japanese work outside.
Great, thanks. And Taihei, last word.
Yeah, I have the same kind of comment. Just try and go global. A lot of people, the people in the NFT industry is so nice and smart, are willing to collaborate with Japanese IPs. So just challenge it and just go for it.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much. Taihei, Kosuke, Mike, keep in touch with us in real life or in the metaverse. Startbahn, STARTBAHN, Taihei, TAIHEI. Kosuke's Twitter is Pinkponic, PINCPONIC, and Mike is at MIKESUNDA. Stay in touch with us, and thanks so much. Have a great rest of conference.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Yayoi.